343 Industries faced a number of challenges when they developed Halo 4. It was their first game as a studio, and they were still building their team while also creating the next chapter in one of the biggest video game franchises out there. With the growing pains out of the way, there was an expectation that their next game would be even more successful. But instead, Halo 5 Guardians turned out to be extremely polarizing to fans and received the most criticism out of any Halo campaign so far. Some players went as far as speculating that the game suffered from substantial cuts or mandated changes from Microsoft throughout development. So, what actually happened during the development of Halo 5? This is the story of how 343 Industries built the most controversial Halo game. In the first year after Halo 4's release, the game's lead writer, Chris Schlurf, would depart 343 to join BioWare. In his absence, the lead writer for its Spartan Ops mode, Brian Reed, would step up to the position.
I think we knew how Halo 5 ended before we knew how Halo 4 ended. I remember discussing the end of this game real early on.
When 343 first inherited the franchise, they planned many of the story beats they eventually wanted the series to go, one of which was transforming Cortana into an antagonist, a plotline that was considered as far back as the very first Halo game.
The big beats of Cortana survives this thing that happens at the end of 4, Cortana comes back, Cortana has this new plan that nobody gets quite sure they agree with. That was all there day one.
Cortana's arc was planned far in advance, but plans were still malleable, and not every story thread would continue as originally intended, such as Halo 4's main antagonist, the Didact.
There were players that felt like his motivations were not clear. And we were surprised by this because we thought, okay, his motivations in the game are pretty simple. He's a badass alien who you reawaken and he wants to obliterate humanity, and it's pretty clear. It should read at a basic level.
Josh Holmes, Halo 4's creative director, was initially confused at the mixed reaction to the Didact, but came to the conclusion that his motivations from the Forerunner trilogy of books may have bled into the main game too much.
What that did was it created the impression with some players that they were missing the larger story if they didn't take part in the books or if they didn't watch the terminals.
While at an early point in pre-production, the Didact appearing in the game was still considered. He later would be deemed extraneous as development continued. Holmes believed he told the story he wanted to in 4 and was actively seeking someone else to take over as creative director. In the meantime, he would still lead the team as they conceptualized Halo 5. An overarching goal was to expand the Halo universe depicted in the games. Early concepts centered around a galaxy-hopping tale, with the UNSC Infinity serving as a hub world, an insurrectionist-controlled mining planet, and a plot revolving around the activation of megalithic Forerunner war machines called Titans. Much of the concept art was drawn with Master Chief in a cloak, which was used as a visual metaphor for artists to convey his state of mind following the loss of Cortana. One idea that stuck early on was the introduction of Master Chief's teammates, Blue Team, who were at one point considered for Halo 4.
Here's Blue Team, that is this beloved group of characters that have been explored in the extended fiction. How do we bring them into the fold and make them a part of the experience?
Blue Team wouldn't be the only Spartan squad that the team wanted to add. Fireteam Majestic from Halo 4 Spartan Ops were planned to feature as well, and would provide a way to examine the Master Chief and his actions from another perspective, a prospect that the team found very compelling. But in order to make these teams fun to play, the developers looked to Halo Reach for inspiration.
I think that was one of the things when we looked at Reach as a game. You had these other Spartans that were surrounding Noble Six, and we're kind of thinking why can't I play as those characters?
Halo 5 would have a newfound focus on cooperative play. For solo players, however, they planned on introducing squad mechanics.
And I think when we're talking to Tim, that's where there was just a natural fit.
Josh Holmes would find his replacement in Tim Longo, who previously served as the director of Star Wars Republic Commando.
I came in kind of at the end of the concept phase of the project, or in the middle of that, and the team had notions that were towards squad direction. So it was a natural fit, I guess, because it's really near and dear to my heart.
With Tim now on board, it became clear that Fireteam Majestic wouldn't work for what the team wanted. Instead, they would create a new Spartan team, Fireteam Kodiak.
We want to intentionally expand the universe too, and we want to give players New Spartans, new main characters to play as.
Keeping Spartan Thorn from Majestic, the rest of Fireteam Kodiak would be composed of new characters, tentatively named Smith, Jones, and Brown. Smith would be the protagonist, an ex-Oni operative who led the search for John 117, whose character would be a mix of James Bond and Lara Croft.
He was Agent Smith for us for a long time. All Matrix jokes aside, Smith was our placeholder name that we knew we'd change.
After the early brainstorming phase, the story concepts eventually settled into a familiar premise: a manhunt for Master Chief and Blue Team, who had mysteriously gone AWOL. The hub world was reduced to a few weapons down missions. The insurrectionist mining planet became the independent world of Meridian, and the Foreigner Titans became known as Guardians. While work was being done on the game's story, a great emphasis would be placed on reworking the gameplay, and that started with evaluating what didn't work in Halo 4.
With Halo 4, we had a lot of critical success. It sold fantastically well. But one thing we did change, I think, for the worse in Halo 4, and fans voted with their feet and walked away from some matchmaking, was making our multiplayer asymmetrical. While we did it with good intentions and some good ideas and even some good design principles, it just didn't work for Halo, and it really didn't work for us.
Halo 4's multiplayer featured loadouts, where players chose which weapons and armor abilities they wanted to spawn with, a feature which dated back to Halo Reach, but would now be removed in favor of equal starts.
Part of making a great competitive game is making sure that everyone is on even footing, level playing field, so they're coming into the match with the same weapons. So we've replaced armor abilities with these new Spartan abilities.
The new Spartan abilities included Thruster, Ground Pound, Spartan Charge, Clamber, Slide, Stabilize, and a Boost Jump, which was eventually cut from the roster. To help create this new suite of abilities, the team used Batman as inspiration.
I like to think that we approach the Spartans similar to how Christopher Nolan approached Batman in the Dark Knight trilogy. Batman still has the same gadgets, but the way they're packaged together makes them feel fresh again.
Sprint, which was metered in both Halo 4 and its appearance as an armor ability in Halo Reach, would now be infinite so that players wouldn't have another resource to manage.
Sprint is a staple for the modern FPS gamer. Leaving it out of Halo 5 would have been ignoring a huge portion of the gaming demographic's expectations, so the call was made to include it.
Yes, it was my final call to put Sprint in Halo. Blow up!
Halo 5's new gameplay had a heavy competitive focus, so pro players were consulted to playtest the game and provide feedback as it was being constructed.
They're involved with helping us find the final tuning for just about every weapon and every feature in the game.
New weapons would also be introduced into the sandbox, including the Hydra missile launcher and the plasma caster, which was originally modeled with its ammo counter on the side of the weapon. Halo 5 would also see the arrival of a new vehicle to the sandbox, the Foreigner Phaeton, and would have originally been part of a socket system, which was based on the ability to swap out cores to modify a vehicle's function. In an effort to address criticisms of the Prometheans from Halo 4, the Knights would be rebalanced to function more as mini-bosses, with a new enemy type designed to replace their role as the primary Promethean combatant. After several concepts, including a Promethean Packmaster, which even reached the modeling phase, the new enemy units would eventually be known as Promethean Soldiers. The Xbox One hardware allowed them to push Halo further than it had ever gone, and they wanted to take advantage of that with a new game mode called Warzone. Conceived of back during the making of Halo 4, it was then pitched and prototyped in early 2013. The mode would be a blend of PvE and PvP and utilize the entire Halo sandbox. It was an ambitious idea, but the team was determined to pull it off. Since there aren't any leaked storyboards or early builds like there were for Halo 4, details about how the campaign evolved over time are a bit sparse, and the timeline is nebulous. However, using now-deleted Waypoint articles, developer statements, and making of featurettes, we can learn a few interesting things. After much deliberation, the new Spartan Fireteam would finally get its name, and its characters figured out. Fireteam Osiris would feature Locke, Vale, Tanaka, and Buck. Spartan Thorn, despite going as far as being modeled and tested in-game, would be replaced with Halo 3 ODST's Buck due to Thorn's actor, Ethan Peck, being unavailable to record. In the first draft of the reunion between Master Chief and Cortana, Cortana wore a flowing gown and had long hair, evoking the image of a powerful queen. This would change to her adopting a more Forerunner-like appearance as development continued. A cutscene where Cortana discovers Roland was planned for the end of the game, but never made it into the final release. The level set on Meridian featured a glass cutter, a weapon that would have been used by the miners before it was eventually cut. The most documented level throughout the development was Tsunami Station, which was the very first prototype to be worked on following the completion of Halo 4.
It was a prototype where throwing grenades would be affected by the wind, and so would enemy characters and occasionally the player.
The team liked the concept of Tsunami Station enough for it to persist across the game's development. Tsunami Station would become Sunaion, a Covenant city on the elite homeworld of Sanghelios. At one point, it was actually 2 levels, one with Master Chief and the other with Spartan Locke.
In the Chief version, the player would fight through the upper area more, while Locke would take on the lower area more. Ultimately, this never went past Blockout.
Parts of the level also included a gondola section and a vehicle section, inspired by Halo 2.
There's a Banshee sequence that saw players destroying the power supplies that were located in various points around an enormous tower. This got cut due to pacing and time concerns.
Changes like these are par for the course of game development, and it's reasonable to assume that many of the other levels went through similar refinement. But as development continued, the studio would be met with a series of challenges and setbacks. It was decided early on that Halo 5 would take advantage of the Xbox One's advanced hardware for larger and more complicated spaces, and achieve a frame rate of 60 frames per second. But maintaining those standards required making sacrifices. One such sacrifice was the removal of split screen, which had been a staple of the series since its very first installment.
Making the decision to remove split screen was a really tough one. The compromises that would need to be made in order to support split screen were just compromises that we weren't willing to make. We didn't feel like it would do justice to the experience.
It's just not feasible with the way the engine works now. We would have loved to put it in. If we could have, we would have. It's certainly a conversation we'll have about the next game.
The engine, which was over 20 years old, was burdened with technical debt and was difficult to develop on, which greatly frustrated developers.
We promised the team that we would do the work on the tools and pipeline for Halo 5, so it wasn't such a challenging environment to develop on. And, best laid plans, we didn't do that. And the team, rightfully so, basically called us on it.
Even Tim Longo, the creative director, was overwhelmed with the scope of the project.
With a huge team like this and Halo 5 being way more enormous than I had anticipated when taking the role, every week around here is kind of insane.
After all, with campaign, arena multiplayer, and Warzone, making a game like Halo 5 was like making 3 games in one.
The big thing for all of us right now is making the difficult choices on whether or not we take new features, whether we fix bugs, whether we want to take some risks and try to get more content into the build, whether we cut things, because if they don't make it into this build, there's a good chance they're not going to make it into the final game.
Despite the difficulties faced by the team, they would eventually push through, and Halo 5 went gold on October 7th, 2015. It wouldn't be long before players would finally get their hands on it. On October 27, 2015, Halo 5 Guardians was released. The team's commitment to enhancing the gameplay paid off, with many praising its multiplayer as the best in the series. Halo 5 sits at an 84 on Metacritic, signifying generally favorable reviews, but down 3 points from Halo 4's 87. The game's campaign, however, would be met with extensive criticism. While there were some who took no issue with the story, the general fan sentiment was that Halo 5's campaign was messy and failed to deliver on its promises.
I am super proud of the story we told with Halo 4. I think with Halo 5, we basically told an overwhelming story. I think we did a good job with Halo 5 on fixing the multiplayer. I just don't think that probably should have been a Halo 5 number story.
My feeling is that as long as there's disagreement, then you're striking some important chords. Bluntly speaking, with story, you're never going to make everyone happy all the time, and you just have to make sure that you're respecting the characters and the universe and driving it forward in meaningful ways.
The campaign prompted many to wonder if the game had suffered from intense cuts or mandated changes during development, but as shown throughout the video, there doesn't seem to be any evidence that supports this. Despite the negative fan reaction, the Halo franchise would continue, and discussions about what comes next with Xbox head Phil Spencer began shortly after release.
There was talk about, like, could we get another Halo out in 2 years? And so we did look at sort of, I would call it like a Halo 5.5. You know, in talking with Phil and kind of weighing, like, do we want a Halo 5.5 or do we want to invest in the future?
Now, perhaps more than ever, presented an opportunity to finally streamline the engine used to develop these games. And beyond that, to reevaluate everything.
I just full support on invest in the future, but not just investing in the future, thinking about, as we invest in the future, how do we remain core to what is Halo? What have we done as 343? Where have we made mistakes? Where have we hit it right? And then what does Halo mean to all of us?
343 began the long process of overhauling their engine, and that would give them time to think about the direction of the franchise. This was uncharted territory.
The truth is, we sort of know where we're heading.
Yeah,
and we have
do.
We have some pillars, but we don't really know where we're going to end up, because all the same challenges and opportunities that we've had on all of the games from Halo 1 till now are still going to be there.
343's story with Halo doesn't end here, so if you want to see a development breakdown for Halo Infinite, please like and subscribe, and consider supporting Screen Takes on Patreon. These videos require a lot of research, writing, asset gathering, and editing, so a few dollars goes a long way. You'll get access to things like text updates, video topic polls, and further readings for all the research that doesn't make it into the videos. You can find a post looking deeper into Brian Reed's claim about Cortana's arc being planned from the beginning, available to patrons right now. Thanks for watching.